So let's get right into it. Today's presenter. So I am, if we haven't met before, if we haven't chatted, I'm Nick Prenger. I'm the founder and CEO of a group called Prenger Solutions Group, and then also this service we call AskGenius. Joined here today by Ashley. Ashley, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. Ashley is our Vice President of Client Services, which means she does all the hard work, right? We work with clients running annual appeals, and she oversees that entire consulting division. What we're here to talk about, let me first explain sort of the background and who we are, then we can get into the heart of it, which is talking about fundraising letters. We work at a company called Prenger Solutions Group. So I founded it 4 years ago. There are 14 of us based here, both in Omaha and then across the country. Our consultants have worked for nonprofits, large and small, all over the country. And we offer a couple things. We do fundraising consulting. We also run annual appeals. So large annual appeals, that's a core of what Ashley and her team do. So think clients that are raising $5 million, $10 million, $20 million a year through largely direct mail fundraising. That's the bread and butter of what we're doing day in and day out. We also, in the last 2 years, have started offering Razor's Edge database administration because a lot of our clients said, hey, you have some smart Razor's Edge people. Can we just outsource the management of these large databases to you? So we said yes. And then we also have gotten really deep into fundraising automation. So helping large clients automate things like email workflows and database cleanup, really nerdy stuff. And that's what we do. At our core, we are the nerdiest fundraising people that you've ever met before. And we love what we do. We do a very good job at it. And the best part about what we do is that we get to test a lot of ideas. So when we are, we wake up in the morning, we've got clients across the country. We are responsible for raising hundreds of millions of dollars, largely through direct mail. And because of that, anything that we can learn, any edge that we can get, right? If we can optimize a pledge card or write a better letter, that is going to result in hundreds of thousands of dollars more raised for our clients. So we are hungry to find things that we can optimize. We run a lot of tests. We make a whole bunch of mistakes. So when we say that we've optimized something, really what I'm saying is we have made a whole lot of dumb mistakes and learned from them and found out what works and what doesn't. Some of the things that we've focused on already, we focused a ton on donor personas, on the design of a pledge card and how much that can impact how much you raise. We've done a whole bunch of work on setting the perfect ask amounts. In fact, that's what AskGenius does. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Fundraising letters, online donor funnels, what your donation page should look like to both increase giving and increase recurring giving. How to use social media, email campaigns. We've actually done 3 webinars now on the first 3. So if you haven't attended, at the end of this webinar, I'll send you the links. We've talked a ton. We've done whole sessions on donor personas, on how to design the best pledge card, setting the perfect ask amounts. And where we are today is on this 4th topic, right? Fundraising letters. So my goal is that when you leave, in 45 minutes or 50 minutes, you are a lot more confident about the letter that you're going to send out. You're looking at the letter that you're sending out a little bit differently. Maybe you feel a little sheepish on what you're sending out the door. Maybe you're full of great ideas on what you want to do for your next appeal letter. I just want this to be the most practical webinar that you've ever attended and give you a bunch of tips and tricks. So that is our whole goal. If you have questions, make sure to hit that Q&A button on your screen. So if a lot of people write questions in the chat, which is great, but I probably won't see it until I get done talking in about a half an hour. So if you have questions, hit the Q&A button. It'll pop up on our screen and I can address them as we go. Okay. So let's talk about fundraising letters, and the best place to start about what does the world's greatest fundraising letter look like is to trick you. And let's talk for a second about all the things that you should be doing before the letter goes out. Because if you want to have the highest performing direct mail letter that you've ever had, the best thing to do is start working 9 months in advance and get your audience ready for that letter. Okay. And here's what I mean. I'm going to share a case study from one of our clients. This is a very good friend of ours. His name is Conde. He's a development director at the Catholic Diocese of Phoenix. So incredibly large organization. They raise about $10 million a year. And what we tried with him has impacted, and what we learned from it, this case study has impacted everything we've done. We had this idea. We thought, what if, so every year they run an annual appeal. Again, they raise about $10 million and through all the normal channels. We thought, what if we spent a year emailing and building relationships with our donors before next year's appeal? What if we really worked hard during the off season, right? there's that sports saying, that quote about, champions are made in the off season. We thought, what is our off season program here? So what we did was we took their database and we split it up evenly among donors, and half of them we emailed about every 2 or 3 weeks, a heartfelt email. The other half we didn't. We treated them like they'd always been treated for years and years. And here's what we found. Do emails increase participation? So we ran this test. On the left, we have the folks that we were sending these heartfelt emails to from Conde, from a real person. On the right, we have the donors, equal in their giving history. So nothing, the deck wasn't stacked here. It was nice, even donors in both groups. One's getting emails, one's not. Do emails increase participation? 38% of the people that receive those weekly, bi-weekly, every 3-week emails participated. 24% of the donors who didn't receive the emails participated, which means that donors were 62% more likely to give to the appeal if they received these emails, in the months leading up to the fundraising solicitation. All of you would take that gladly, right? A 62% increase in the likelihood to participate. What about retention? Did it help keep donors from lapsing? And the answer is yes. Only 6% lapsed in the group that we emailed and communicated with, while 19% lapsed from the folks that we were not communicating with regularly through email. That means that donors were 3 times more likely to renew their gift. What about large gifts? What about the size of gifts? The same story. Average gift was $264 from those donors who got the email and communication every couple of weeks. $107 for those folks who didn't. It means the gifts were 2.5 times larger. What about recurring gifts? We've spoken a bunch about recurring gifts. I'm sure we'll do webinars. We always love to share what our methods. We'll have a whole webinar on recurring giving. Did this impact recurring giving? Those folks who got the heartfelt emails, 16% actually ended up making recurring gifts, a set it and forget it monthly gift to their appeal. 5% of the folks who did not receive the email made recurring giving, which means that if we communicated with them during the off season, they were 3 times more likely to make a recurring gift. The takeaway here, and I promise you, some of you are like, this is incredible. I see some notes in the chat. Others like, man, when's he going to get to the letter? I got to get this letter to the printer, and just tell me what I got to put in there. Here's the takeaway, and then we'll start talking about the letter. The takeaway is that you should all be emailing your donors a whole lot more often, and not just email. Candidly, you should be calling them. You should be writing them notes. All the things that that build that relationship, because that is the single most important thing that you can do to make your fundraising letter more effective. There's lots of stuff in the letter that we're going to talk about, but think about your off season. You want to send personal, heartfelt emails from a real person with no photos or graphics, and that's something that is hard for a lot of our clients, right? You want to overly design those emails, but they don't work as well as just an email that was written by a real person. 8-to-1 nourishment ratio. Ashley, anything I'm missing here? So you do, for a lot of our clients, you are the voice of a lot of them, helping to kind of ghostwrite these emails. Anything I'm missing or anything you want to highlight?
I would just say to, keep the heartfelt part is very important, and keep them fun. It takes several stewardship focused emails to really get in a pattern of people to engage with you. So before you ever jump in and use this platform to, put out a giving link or anything like that, it really needs to have that stewardship focused and keep it fun. One of our best performing emails that we've ever written had Garth Brooks lyrics in it. And the responses to that was just phenomenal. So keep that in mind. It doesn't have to be super overly serious. Bring in, culture and things that are happening, because that's relatable to people and people like that. So, and then you'll see the donors start emailing you back. One example that I have is Margaret. I was writing emails for her for several months. And then she started, talking in one of her emails about a cold winter day and how she loves crockpot recipes. Her email was flooded with crockpot recipes following this. So people are engaging, they are reading it, and she was building that relationship. So then by the time she ended up putting a giving link into one of her emails, they were seeing great gifts come from it.
Yes, and it just works. It's hard work, but it works. There's nothing magic about it. And somebody asked, will we be providing samples? Yes, we will provide samples of these. Build up the relationship with your audience. Email is a great way to do it. It will make all of your later fundraising more effective. In terms of how often, so we talked about the 8-to-1 nourishment ratio. I should explain that. We at PSG live by a rule of we have to communicate and engage with the donor 8 times before we have permission to ask them for a gift. So, and that just kind of guides all of our thinking. So whether that's through email or social media or whatever it might be, You cannot just ask, or you're going to not enjoy the results. Here is what we would do for a typical client. So this is the calendar year for 2022. The blue circles are when we would send a heartfelt email to our donors. We can get in, if you want, during Q&A to a lot of the technical details on how do you send those emails and what platforms and how can you use automation. We can nerd out on that if you want, but this is a good sample of what your calendar might look like. So that'd be 34 emails if you're counting. Of those 34, follow the 8 to 1, about 30 of them would just be about impact and appreciation and building a relationship and getting your voice in front of the donors, thanking them, being relatable, getting permission to ask them for money, down the road. Only 4 of them would be invitations to donate. And those would all be tied to a fundraising vehicle, a letter that's going out supplemented by an email. Okay. Standalone email fundraising doesn't really work. What works is when you do your traditional fundraising, send out that direct mail, make it great, and then follow it up with an email with a link to donate. Okay, so now we've made you suffer through. You had to eat your vegetables for 5 minutes here on all the off-season stuff you should be doing. Let's talk about the letter itself. World's greatest fundraising letter. So this is all of the advice from our failed experiments and our things that we've done that have worked really well. Plus, we do a ton of research, and there are great authors out there. Jeff Brooks, Tom Ahearns, a gentleman, Dr. Russell James. There's tons of research out there. So we're just applying everything that we've learned, and we're going to share it with you. But lots of credit around for folks that have been doing this for a very long time. So let's start with why. When you're sitting down to write that fundraising letter, if you're a development director, chances are you're not sitting down to a blank page. You're opening up the letter that you sent last year, and maybe you're making some tweaks to it because you're pressed for time and you want to just get it out the door. And the letter from last year looks like the letter from the year before that. Okay. I challenge you this year to start with a blank sheet of paper and start with this. Why does your organization do what you do? Because I'm here to tell you, your donors care less about what you do. They care about why you do it. So it might be this. You might be an organization, and the why is that your organization exists because everybody deserves an opportunity, right? Or maybe your organization exists because you're worried about the future that you're leaving for kids, or you feel that we have a duty to help the less fortunate. It might be, hey, we want a great place to live. Maybe you're a zoo or a museum and you want Omaha or Cleveland or Anchorage to be an incredible place to live for families. And that's the why of why you exist. It could just be that we want kids to be safe and happy. Whatever it is for you, start with the why, not we provide X number of meals, but why do you provide the meals? When you get that down to a sense in your head and you understand it, you know exactly why people are going to respond to your letter and who will donate. It's the people that share that same sentiment. Why you're doing what you're doing is critical. When you start that way, you will then shift your focus. And instead of writing a brochure letter, which is the worst performing letter, a brochure letter is one that says, our nonprofit is so great. We serve X number of meals. We help this many people. Those letters don't perform. What performs well is a letter that is focused on the donor. Okay. So the first big lesson here, your appeal letter is not about how wonderful your organization is. Your appeal letter is about how wonderful the donor is. Okay. It's not about you, right? It's not about you. It is about the donor. And this is tough because a lot of the folks on the line, we've got, hundreds of people here on the webinar. Many of you know this, and your battle is not learning this. It's managing up, right? Your executive director, or maybe the board of the nonprofit is full of attorneys like myself who say, oh no, we need to make this a really formal letter and tell them how great we are. And we got to share our 990s and we got to do, it's a big performance review. Those comments might come from a good place, but it's terrible advice. It will not raise you more money. Your donors don't care about that stuff. And if they do, it's because they're really invested and they're getting into the details, and you should probably move them on to the board. Your donors care about why you're doing what you're doing. They want an emotional connection. That will be your best performing fundraising letter. What your donors want are the same things that all of us want. They want to belong, right? They want to feel part of a group. They want to see their values in action. If you exist because you think that kids should be happy and safe, they share those values. The people that are going to donate to you feel the same way. And when you show them that that's what you care about, they will respond. They want to see their values in action. They want to win. They want to feel good. They want to feel loved. They want to feel seen, right, and appreciated. They want to feel smart. You're a smart donor for supporting us, for doing this work. You see the need that is out there. They want to feel needed and appreciated. These are your donors. So when you think of it in these terms, why we're doing what we're doing, who is the audience that's going to donate to us, or what is it they're looking for. This is a very it's a soft letter, right? It's a relationship type letter. This is not a formal corporate letter that goes out. This is something where there's great authors. Dr. Russell James just this morning put something out, talking about using family language, not business language. Write a letter and use phrases as if you're talking to your grandma about what you're doing. Here is one of the best tips I can give you. When you sit down to write your fundraising letter, and I will share a sample of the world's greatest fundraising letter, we will walk through it, but I just want to make sure we're all in the right frame of mind. When I sit down to write a fundraising letter for our clients, or when Ashley does, or someone on our team, we always want to write a letter that makes the reader nod his or her head. Because if we can do that, if we write a letter that is so good that the donor gets it and they start nodding, we've won, right? They're going to make a gift. We've hit that sweet spot of we've matched our mission with what they care about. So picture a donor nodding their head when they read your letter. This is what most of your donors look like, right? In terms of age, the average donor is about 68 years old. 30 years ago, the average donor was 68 years old. 30 years from now, the average donor is going to be about 68 years old. Before they read their fundraising letter, they look like this, and you want them to look like this when they get done reading your fundraising letter. It is about the smart decisions they've made. It's about how much they care about this same thing, about why they're smart, why they're incredible, why they're so generous. Make them feel smart, make them feel like heroes, okay? So that is the tone and the feeling that you should have when you sit down to write a letter. And here is, I'm going to share a hard truth, with you, and I'm sure direct mail consultants will not like this hard truth. Any organization that gets paid by convincing you to send out a whole lot of letters to people have never given before. This is the truth. There's a great book called Breakthrough Advertising by a guy named Eugene Schwartz. I think it's like 40 years old. Stop what you're doing, turn off the webinar, go read this book. Here's the section I want to highlight. It says, it's talking about advertising, selling shoes or selling steaks or knives or whatever it might be. It says copy, like what you write down, it cannot create a desire for a product. You cannot create a desire for a product. All you can do is take the hopes and dreams and fears and things that already exist in your customer, and you can channel them to what you're offering. The exact same is true from fundraising letters. You cannot write a letter, and I'm really good at writing letters. Ashley's even better. We cannot write a letter that is so good that can take somebody that does not care, about feeding the hungry and make them want to feed them, and make them want to donate to you. If that flame is not already in their hearts, you will not convert them through a direct mail letter. You might, by working with them, by getting into events, by changing their mind, in the long term, be able to convert them. But when we're talking about fundraising letters, your audience are people who already care about your mission. So stop banging your head against the wall, trying to get people that don't care about your organization to give. If you try and write that letter, it will fail because you're going to write for an audience that doesn't really exist. Stop worrying about it and write for your core audience, which are people who are already in your fold, who care about what you're doing. You already know their names. Okay. Letter formation. Now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty stuff. Here is what your letter should look like. Okay. This is the slide you guys can all screenshot, and of course we'll share it with you. People are like, man, stop talking about the soft stuff and just tell me how long the letter should be and what magic words I should use to be able to raise the money. All right, here's what you need to know. Your letter should be heartfelt and informal. You should have indented paragraphs. This blew my mind. I was always annoyed. I've shared the story before. My dad is about 72. He's the guy that indents his emails, right? When we got him onto using email 20 years ago, he hit the space bar 5 times for every paragraph. To this day, it drives me nuts. He was on to something. When it comes to fundraising letters, use indentations because it makes your letter easier to read. Use large font sizes, 13 or 14, Times New Roman. That is not the default. You're going to have to click if you're using Microsoft Word and turn it off of Calibri and get it onto Times New Roman. I saw Laura in the chat says, I can't stand the indented paragraphs. I'm the same way, but it works. We know this because we've tested it and there's research out there. Remember, your average donor is older. Times New Roman is easier to read. Any serif font that has little wings on it is easier to read. That's why when you go to the library, you pick out a book, they're not written in Calibri, right? They're written in something with a serif. You should have underlined and bold words, and we'll talk about why. The big one, it should be longer than you think. 2 to 4 pages long. A longer heartfelt letter will overperform a single page letter every day of the week. You should have a Johnson box at the top. I'll highlight what that is in a second. And you should have a PS at the end. Good question from Ann, who says, what if our brand and our marketing require certain fonts? If that font is easy to read, that's great. Make sure it's size 13 or 14. If that font is designed by an artist and a graphic designer, and it's not easy to read, you need to scrap it, because your ability to raise funds and carry out your mission is more important than a brand standard that was designed by somebody who's not a fundraiser. Ashley, what's the hardest part? So we work with clients, we come in, they've been doing things a certain way, and we share this knowledge. What's the biggest shock? What's the hardest thing to get clients to come around on?
Yep, it's the longer letter. It's going from short and concise 1 page to 2, 3, 4 pages long. We're just not conditioned to think that way. We want to kind of get the message in and get out, and that's not the case. Donors will read the longer letter and they'll be invested in it. They don't need it to be overly formulated bullets, none of that. They need it to be long and ugly and messy. And remember that heartfelt message and sharing that story, because that's what's going to draw them in.
Yes. And this is an area too, I see it a ton, where like the boards of directors, whoever has to sign off on the letter, they hate the long, messy letter. They want it to look polished. They want it to, if you're on the board of a large nonprofit, you got there because you're accomplished in corporate America and you want it to be organized and have a lot of bullet points. And all of those instincts are dead wrong. They're just dead wrong. I hear a lot from like CFOs of nonprofits we work with. They're like, Nick, we don't have time. Our donors are busy people. They have, they're successful, industry titans. They don't have time to read things. Those aren't your donors, right? The people that get a letter from you and that just breeze through it, that's not your donor. Your donor is somebody who gets a piece of mail from you and reads every word. Those are the people. So give them, what they want. I'm going to do a quick poll here. I want to know how many folks out there are already writing longer letters. So take a minute, participate. Let us know, what is the letter typically they're sending out? Of course, many organizations send out a lot of appeals. I'm curious who out there is sending these long letters already. Got about 80% participation here. I'll give another 10 seconds or so. A note, Sandy, I love that comment in there. She brings up a good point that when she writes letters, she's writing, we all do. We write with ourself in mind. What would we want? Well, we are very rarely the typical donor to our nonprofit, right? The typical donor is older. They want family language. They want you to write at about a 5th grade education. They don't want it to be clunky. They want it to be easy to read. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll. I'm going to share the results here. So not terrible, right? We shouldn't be shocked by that. About half the people are writing the 1-page letter. That I wouldn't have been surprised if that would have been 70%. And then some people go as far as 2 pages. We've only got a total of 6 organizations out of the hundreds here that write something that's 3 or more pages. Okay, interesting stuff. Your first big takeaway here is you can write a longer letter, make sure it's heartfelt. Now, there's nothing magic about the length. If you were writing a crappy letter that donors don't care about, that doesn't really connect with them emotionally, a crappy 1-page letter will also be a crappy 4-page letter. So don't waste your printing on that. Make sure it's a good letter. If it's good, if it tells a story, you will have better success. So here's what it looks like. And again, we will send you the link to this Word document so you can actually play with it. You can use it as a template if you want. I want to highlight a couple things. Okay, so this is our world's greatest fundraising letter. Let me know in the chat if anybody recognizes the fake nonprofit. If anybody knows the background on the Human Fund, I would enjoy if that resonates with anybody. Oh, well done. Riley St. Clair wins. It's a Seinfeld reference. Okay, so the top right, this is called a Johnson box. When you receive direct mail, you should all consume direct mail, both political fundraising and from other nonprofits. You'll notice they have this little white space there. Use that white space, because the way study after study after study has been done, and they show the way that people consume letters is they open it up and they look at that Johnson box and they look at their name to see if you've got their name right, if it's personalized, and then they go down and they look at the PS. And only after that do they go back up to the top and read the letter. So the only purpose of this Johnson box is to get them to read the letter. I don't like asking for a gift there. I don't like getting to that point. I just want something, I want to personalize it if possible, and I want to get them to read the dang letter, because once we've done that, we've got them. Personalize your introduction. This is the year 2022. If anyone on this call is sending out a dear friend letter, stop everything else you're doing, stop the webinar, go back and clean up your database so that you can actually send emails and letters addressing people by their first name. It is a bare minimum. It is a table stakes requirement for doing effective fundraising. Your first sentence needs to be short. There's fascinating research on this. It needs to be under 10 words. I like if it's 6 or 7 words. You need, again, we're just coaxing them into the letter. Short first sentence. Do not start with a long paragraph. Do not start with a long sentence. Something short and punchy that's interesting. And then you can get into the heart of the story. Excuse me. So on this case, I will share this so you can read the letter on your own. I won't go through it all here, but it's a story. This is a fake nonprofit that does some social services, maybe for the homeless, helping people get back on their feet. And it's a story written in the first person using small words, emotional words, the kind of language that you would want to use if you were talking with your grandma, and it draws the reader in. That's what's happening on page 1. We know that longer letters overperform shorter letters, so we let it breathe, and it goes on to page 2. And what do we have on page 2? A couple of really important elements. Something that calls out the donor and makes them the hero. Remember the image of the older couple wearing the Superman cape? This is that sentence, right? I'm grateful for people like you who are willing to step up. You share the same values as we do. You know that this is a problem. I'm so grateful because you are the hero of the story. And then we have something punchy, okay? And it's bold and underlined. This is something they'll read. Many donors will read this, or many recipients of the letters will read this before they go back and see the whole letter. It's telling the story about a neighbor who had a son, who moved back in with them. And they say, well, I think it's admirable what my neighbors did, but we're reinforcing for the donor here. I think it's admirable what my neighbors did. I think it's downright incredible when you offer that help to a complete stranger. Again, we're making the donor feel like a hero. We are putting ourselves in their shoes. This letter is not how many meals we served or how many people we placed in new jobs or how many, people we helped off the streets. That's not what it is. It's about the donor, how great they are, how we share the same values. And then you get to the ask. This case is on page 2. It says, Holly and Nick, sorry, back up. We started the Human Fund because there are people that really need our help and they have nowhere else to turn. And then we have a spot to add a sentence. And this is where the customization, the personalization comes in for your letter. So up to this point, the entire letter fits on 2 pages. It could go to everyone in your database. This is the heart, this is the template. But then when you're delivering this to the printer, you're going to insert a segmented ask depending on who your donor is. Okay, and here's what we would do. And we'll talk about the segments here in a second. For a major donor segment, that highlighted yellow part might read something like this. I want you to know, Ashley and Rob, that you're among our most generous donors. And I'm so grateful for your generosity. Thank you for including us in your charitable giving year after year. We're calling them out. We're telling them we know who you are. We're telling them you are among our most generous donors. I would love it even more if we could say you're one of the top 20 donors to our organization. Like the level of personalization that you can show here is really important. Maybe you have members of a giving society. If it's a giving society, then the ask is, you are a member of our giving society. You're incredible. Would you renew your annual gift of X amount? In a little bit, we're going to talk about when you should ask for dollars and when you should just ask without having a specific amount. Lapsed members of a giving society get their own ask amount and their own invitation. Prospective members, so maybe you have a giving society that starts at $1,000. Anyone who donated more than $750 previously should get this ask. You've been such a strong supporter. Would you consider joining 385 families who give $1,000 a year? Recent new donors, if you attended any of our webinars talking about donor personas, you know that a recent new donor is it's your second greatest opportunity to increase giving to your appeal. When somebody makes that $20 gift or the $50 gift for the first time, that is when you can elevate them up to $200 or $500 if you do a good job. So make sure that we're calling them out and saying, hey, I think that you just made your first gift. Would you consider supporting us in a bigger way? Then we move into that outer ring. People who haven't supported your organization or your appeal in a meaningful way, but maybe they've attended an event. You had your gala event, a bunch of law firms and accounting firms bought tables, and then they invited their friends and neighbors, and then they got their names into your system. This is a letter for them. You attended an event. How did we do? Let us know what you thought. And I'm hoping if we did a good job, would you join the thousands of other families who support us every year? Everybody else. This should not be everybody else on earth. This should be anybody else who has shown some sort of inclination to your organization. They attended an event, maybe not your signature gala event, or they're in your database, or maybe they donated, but it's been a couple of years. It's okay to have a message to them. A really useful tool as you're looking at these segments, and we'll talk a little bit more about segments in a second. I want to call out Hemingway app. Let me know in the chat if anybody uses this, because this was one of those sort of life-changing, discoveries. For me, it was the Hemingway app when I'm writing letters. and this thing called ASAP Utilities when I'm working in Excel. So if anybody uses Hemingway app, let us know. There we go. Alexa uses it. You guys are going to fall in love with this. It is the perfect tool for what we're talking about, which is write a letter, copy and paste it into HemingwayApp.com. It will highlight things for you. Sentences that are hard to read, what your readability is. You want it to be 4th or 5th grade. And I know that sounds terrible, but that's what you want. You want it to be an easy to read letter. Okay. So use the Hemingway app. Yes, good comment. Somebody uses Grammarly as well, does a similar thing. So check it out. Back to donor segments. Who are the donor segments? You're writing a letter. You're never just writing one letter. You're usually writing 8 or 9 different versions of that core letter. This is what Ashley will do for all of our clients. We're sitting down and it's appeal season. We're writing that letter. We're making it heartfelt. We're doing all the things we talked about. And then we're having segments for these groups. First one is recurring donors. If somebody already has a recurring gift set up, they need to get their own letter so that they're not being asked for another gift. They're being acknowledged for that recurring gift and shown a way that they can increase if they want. Major donors, it's a no-brainer. First-time donors are the next most important, and these are in order. So when you have your database, let's say you have 10,000 donors and you have to go through and decide who gets what letter, this is the order you do it in. Segment the recurring donors first, and then major donors, and then first-time donors. And then donors just below each giving tier. If you have a giving society, go in and mark them. Donors to in-person events or gala events. Non-donors, but who have a high wealth rating score because they're giving to another organization. And then you get to everybody else, okay? Ashley, anything I missed there? Are those the ones that we typically include?
Yep, I think so. And just focusing on that recurring and major donors, make sure you really are following that order because it's just really crucial to reach out to those people.
Yeah. And the way you're delivering this to the printer also, and you'll see in the template that we share, you're writing the letter. So in our case, it was a 2-page letter. Page 3 is all of those segmented ask paragraphs, right? So you have the insert language here, and then you give the donor the individual paragraphs and show them how to match it up. Okay, so some strategic advice, things that we get asked all the time about letters. Let's start with this one. Should we list the donor's previous gift amount in the letter or on the pledge card or at all? A very lawyerly answer, it just depends. Here's what I can share about this strategy. Should we, if a donor gave $2,000 last year, should we somehow call that out? We've tested this a bunch. The answer depends. Here's the thoughts. It's helpful if you want to anchor that donor to the same gift. If you feel like you've maxed out and you just want, you're worried that they made a big gift and they'll forget and they're now going to give you $100 instead, that's helpful, right? So it's a judgment call on your end. But it's really dangerous if you think your data isn't accurate. Tell me, stop me when this sounds familiar. You're nervous about sending out that letter to someone saying, thank you for your gift of $50 last year. If you think there's a chance they gave more, because maybe they're, the wife, cut a check and the husband cut a check, and in your database you have them coded as different people. So you have to be really confident in your data. The last thing you want to do is thank somebody for a specific gift and maybe it's off, right? Or there's the whole soft credit thing where maybe they gave a gift through their business and they, are wondering why that's not showing up. So it's risk reward. You're okay if you don't do it because it makes asking for an increase really conspicuous. So if somebody gave $100 last year, sort of a token gift, and I want to ask them for $500 this year, that's hard to do. That's a big leap because you're going to have that $100 in the letter and then you're going to show a $500 ask. And then suddenly the donor, all the spell is broken. They're not thinking about that wonderful letter you just wrote. They're thinking about the gall and like, is that an appropriate ask amount? You've taken it from the creative emotional side of the brain, which is what we think of when we're donating, and you turn it into a math problem, which is not what's going to result in larger gifts. Okay, if you have questions on this, make sure to hit the Q&A button and we'll tackle them. Another question we get asked a ton, sort of the same vein, should we ask for a specific amount in the letter? If Ash and I are fundraising consultants, we come from a long line of fundraising consultants, and we're always told you have to ask for a specific gift. Do not just send out that general letter. You have to ask them, tell the donor exactly what you're looking for. Here is what we found. No, you do not have to ask for a specific amount in the letter. And here is the reason why. For many of our clients, it would break the spell of that heartfelt letter. The power of a letter that is well written, focused on the donor's core beliefs and identifying the mission that we share together, that can be broken when suddenly it's like, would you consider a gift of $37.50 or whatever your formula is. Ask for that specific amount, but let the ask strings in your pledge card do that heavy lifting for you. Okay, and I'll talk about pledge cards in a second, but what I'm saying is write a heartfelt letter. It's okay just to invite them to support your organization. They go out to fill out the pledge card, and the first box that they have to check, that is your ask amount. That's the specific amount that's custom just to them. And when you do it that way, it doesn't break the spell of a letter. It's very subconscious. The donor won't even think about it. As long as you have it in the right range, they're going to check that first box and make a donation. The exception to this rule is going to be if your ask amount is tied to something meaningful. It's not a math algorithm, it's something meaningful. Here's what I mean. Please feed a child for $20 a week. Or in the example we shared, please join our giving society at $1,000. If there's something tied to that number, if it's meaningful, it's okay to ask for it in the letter. But if not, if it's just we're asking you to increase your gift by 10%, don't do it. Just let the ask amounts do that on your pledge card, do that heavy lifting for you. So let's talk about pledge cards for a second. And we'll get to Q&A. There's two kinds of pledge cards. So there is a tear-off pledge card. So this is from a client of ours. This is probably the most common, where you're printing your letter. It's actually not printed on 8.5 by 11 paper. Your printer is printing it on that legal, the longer paper, and then the donor tears it off. Or you can have a standalone pledge card, which might be the typical third of a page size that you have on the left, or it might even be a full page pledge card. Teaser, we actually did an entire webinar on the world's greatest pledge card and what it should look like. And Ashley ran a test, I think a couple of years ago, comparing the results between a smaller pledge card and a larger full-size pledge card. Ashley, don't tell them which one to use. We want them to go check out that webinar. You can, everything you ever need to know about pledge cards, we'll tell you when to use a full-size pledge card. But for now, let's just talk about the difference between the two. Ashley, do you mind running through these?
Yeah, sure. So typically with that tear-off pledge card, it's, your letter and your tear-off are all in one long sheet. So it's easier to print. It ends up, you're not going to miss any donor information that way. So that's one of the biggest reasons to do it that way. You're not worried about matching the pledge card information to the letter. And generally it's less expensive. So that's typically the route that a lot of people go. Versus the standalone, it is more expensive. That greater risk of error between the donor information on the letter and the pledge card. It just always is a little unnerving sometimes when we think about that process. But if you're focused on your long, heartfelt letter, sharing your story, that's what's going to do the work and bring people in. That's what's going to draw them in. And then sometimes it does feel more polished when that pledge card is separate, because they're really focused on that letter and reading that. But there's a lot of different factors that come in. So
you got to balance that. And we've seen research, right, that maybe a standalone, a pledge card that's not a tear off might perform a little bit better. We just don't know if it's enough yet to overcome the nervousness we have with some of the printers we use, that they're not going to put the wrong pledge card in with the wrong letter, right?
Right, exactly. You have to have a great relationship with your printer, and you've had to have tested it a few times with them to feel really good about it. But yeah, we'll have to report back if we find out any new information on that front.
Yep. Well said. Okay, so the world's greatest pledge card. Again, we've done a whole webinar on this, just highlighting. This is what the front looks like. This is what the back looks like. You can even download that, I know, from our AskGenius site. We'll talk the last topic we have. We'll talk about ask amounts. Then we're gonna take the Q&A. So we talked about the fundraising letter. We talked about the pledge card that goes with it, and all the things that we've covered so far. Eventually, you come down to this point where you want to ask people for the right amount of money. Here's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a pledge card. When we say ask amounts, we call them ask strings. I've learned through these webinars that people call them ask amounts, gift tables, bump tables, ask ladders, gift ladders. We as fundraisers, we cannot agree on what we call these things right here, right? When Ashley gets a pledge card and she goes to fill out that first checkbox, the amount that is in that spot. We did a huge research project a couple of years ago to find out how do nonprofits set those ask amounts. And there's actually 3 ways. Number one is they don't set those ask amounts. They just send everybody the exact same pledge card, right? You're mailing out to 1,000 people or 10,000 people. They're all getting the exact same ask amount. No surprise, that's leaving a ton of money on the table. The second way was that they might create high, medium, or low pledge cards. There's a $25 and $100 version, and then you do some segmentation. About 20% of nonprofits, a little bit less than a third, have some sort of a formula where usually they're looking at like last year's gift and then asking for more. So you gave $100 last year, we're asking you to consider a gift of $110 this year. You've all probably received that mailing. The problem that we had with all this on the consulting side was we have all this data inside, sitting inside of your, Salesforce or Razor's Edge or Classy or Neon or Salsa or any of those, Bloomerang, Neon. Again, mentioned Neon twice. It's all sitting inside your database. But then when your fundraisers go to send out the annual appeal or the direct mail appeal, none of that data is making it in there. Like, you're not making decisions or ask amounts based on all that data that you worked so hard to collect. So that was frustrating to us. And when we were younger and more naive, we had this idea of what if we set custom amounts, for every household. And Ashley's laughing because our whole firm almost imploded because of this idea, and everybody wanted to quit because we bit off more than we could chew. But we said, okay, we have these clients, we're sending out 100,000 pieces of mail at a time. What if instead of just a one size fits all, or asking for a little bump based on last year's gift, what if we looked at all the data? What if we went and looked at what did they give last year and 2 years ago? Let's bring in wealth research. What does wealth research say that we can ask people for? What did they give to the gala event? Take all those data points, and for every donor, we set an amount that's the perfect amount for them. So what we did was, most of our clients were on Razor's Edge. We took all that data and we exported it into Microsoft Excel, right? So well beaten path there of people that that want to do something and we're comfortable in Excel, so we get everything into Excel. And then we had these giant spreadsheets and we had all those data points on them, and we went through and we looked at them. We sorted the spreadsheet by what did they give last year, and then what did they give 2 years ago and 3 years ago, and we set ask amounts and then just tweaked them as we went. And then we looked at wealth research, and if that said they could give a larger amount, we might bump up the ask a little bit. And we did this naively for a bunch of clients because we really wanted that bespoke experience and set that perfect ask amount for everybody. And it worked really well. I mean, crazy well, to the point that clients were raising millions of dollars more through their direct mail just by having that perfect amount in front of the donor, right? They send a letter and the ask amount that is in the pledge card, they check the first box, and they just increase their giving, X amount. That was the good news. The bad news was it was an incredible amount of work. I mean, just a stupid amount of work. Every letter that was going out was taking us, days of grinding away in Excel in our basements. So we realized that it was a good idea. It was a flawed execution of the idea. So this is where AskGenius, who you've heard about because you're here today, this is the tool that we built to do that specific problem. So we're going to get to questions in a second, but just to explain why you see AskGenius everywhere. If you're on Razor's Edge, you can find it in the marketplace. If you're not on Razor's Edge, you're on one of the other platforms, you can use it as well. Just go to askgenius.com. This solves that problem. So when you're writing a great fundraising letter and then you have a pledge card and you want to say, okay, what are we asking the donor for? AskGenius is the tool that solves that one very painful problem of taking all of your data and turning it into a perfect ask amount. So the 10-second version of what it does, you go in, you start a new appeal, you tell us, do you want 3, 4, or 5 asks? Do you want annual? Do you want monthly? And then you go in and if you're connected to Razor's Edge, you can connect it directly and map a couple fields. Otherwise, you're going to upload a spreadsheet. We've got an integration with Salesforce coming up soon. And then you choose the strategy. You can say, do you want the secret sauce strategy, which we always use, or you can be really aggressive and swing for the fences, or you can be conservative. You decide how aggressive you want to be with your ask amounts. It then does all of the math for you. So all that stuff that we used to spend hours and hours and days doing, it will crunch all the numbers, pull all the data together. It'll show you exactly what you're about to ask for, and it'll group people in a nice, easy way. And then you can go in and adjust the ask amounts, right? Go in and find that major donor who just made a big gift and make sure that the ask amount is the right. For them, you can improve ask amounts. Then you send it off to the printer and it solves the problem. Okay, so that's what AskGenius does. Does it work? Candidly, yes, it worked. It has exceeded our own expectations. The first person to use it was Amy Schauer, who might even be on the webinar here today at Stonehill Communities. 34%. She used AskGenius and she helped us work out some kinks and saw great results. 34% of donors increased their giving. They exceeded their annual goal by 120%. The average donation increased 58%. 58%. Who wouldn't take that? Another one of our clients jumped in early on, so a large client, the Catholic Diocese of Dallas. They have about a $6 million annual appeal, I think. It might be a little bit higher. They use this, most successful appeal ever. They raised $1 million more. Average gift is up 24% when it's all said and done. So it will not get more donors in. It will not increase participation, to our knowledge. It will not make your job any more fun. It will not make your donors suddenly, shower you with $1 million gifts. What it will do is make sure that you're not leaving money on the table, and it will increase the amount that you're raising through your direct mail appeal because everybody's getting asked for just the right amount, not too high, not too low. You're going to see your average gift go up. If you want to learn more about this, where you can do a couple things. We always have, we do 10 a month. So if you want to do a demo, scan the QR code, they'll go quickly. They'll probably be gone before I finish the sentence. Schedule a private demo. We can talk about your organization and how it would work. Or we're going to do a live demo next Friday. So next Friday at 10:30 Central, you can attend. It's a little bit less demanding on your time. If you don't want to like really talk through all the individual stuff on your organization, just come show up. There'll probably be 20, 30, 40 nonprofits there. We'll walk through the product there. So that's next Friday. Scan the QR code there. We'll also drop in the chat if we haven't already, if you want to sign up for a demo. Okay, so here's the last slide, and then we're going to get to all your questions and answers. Things that we will send you. We covered a lot of ground today. So check your email by tomorrow is our hope, right? So check your email. And if you don't see it, look in your spam folder, an email from me. You'll have a link to this webinar recording. If we hit on a nerve for you and you want to share something maybe with your board or with your executive director, if you've been fighting to write longer letters or more heartfelt letters, let us back you up. Share this webinar recording with anybody you want to. There'll be a link where you can download these slides. There will be a template, so that the actual letter that we drafted in the format that we recommend, that world's greatest fundraising letter, we will have that, including all the different segmented ask language. We'll send you some more information about AskGenius if you want. We will have links to prior webinars and resources. Actually, going to launch a poll here. If you do want us to send you more information about AskGenius, just let us know. We can do that. Links to prior webinars. So we talked about the pledge card design. Ashley and I talked about donor personas. We have some coming up where we're going to talk about fundraising automation. So anything that we've ever shared before, we'll get you some links there, so you can make sure to go see that. What else will we have here? Pledge card design. Yep, we talked about that. Okay, so let's get to Q&A. I'll stop talking. Everybody's listened to me for a long time. Ashley, have you looked through it all? Is there anything that you know that you want to tackle as I catch my breath and kind of open up the Q&A here?
Yeah, so we've been talking about the heartfelt letter. So what does heartfelt mean? I mean, how do we define that?
Right. So let's start with what it's not. Right. Heartfelt is not a corporate letter. It's not a legal letter. It's not bullet points saying how many meals you served or how many people came to the zoo. It's something heartfelt that is in the tone of the person who's signing it. Right. If you have a nonprofit and you're sending out letters that are not signed by a person, and I mean like authored by a person, you're doing it wrong. And we have some clients like this that say, oh, we don't want to give all the credit to one person or whatever reason they have. Like they have a letter come from like the team, at the museum. Stop doing that, because that hurts the donor experience. You need it to come from a real person. And when we say heartfelt, they're sharing some of themselves in that letter. It's personal, it's informal, it's not using corporate language, it's using family language. You're telling a story, you're doing all the things that we shared. Use that template example that we shared. And if you're thinking that your organization doesn't have something really sexy, right? You're like, we're not saving kids from the street, we're not doing something big and dramatic. You're wrong. I mean, you have donors that care, whatever it is that you're doing. If you're a zoo, you're improving the quality of life in Omaha, or in Biloxi or wherever you might be. There is a why behind what you're doing that will resonate with donors. And I'm guaranteeing you, those donors care more about the emotional aspect of it and why you do what you do than about the quantifiable metrics. Stop sharing metrics and letters.
Right. So on the more logistical side for the letters, everyone's kind of conditioned to that one-sided one letter. Is it okay to do like a two-sided letter, or should it go on two fronts of letterhead? And how do you work that in with your letterhead?
Right. So we've done it both ways. I think it's okay as long as your paper is thick enough. So we're really getting into logistics here. As long as you're not using really thin paper where it like bleeds through and looks weird, it's okay to do front, back, front, back. If you do that, you run into the issue of, can you do a tear off pledge card, or should you do an inserted pledge card? If you're at that point, you should probably have a standalone pledge card so that it doesn't get weird where you have like one longer letter and you tear it off and then there's a shorter letter behind it. So it's okay to do back to front. It's okay to have letterhead on there. Pages 2, 3, and 4 should not be letterhead. It should just be normal white space. Anything I'm missing on that, Ashley?
I don't think so. One example that I have done with they wanted it on two fronts. We did a little buck slip on the second half where the tear off would have been on the front. So you can get a little more information if you don't have like a brochure or something to go with it. So
Mark, I like it.
Yep. Perfect.
I see one from Jeff I wanted to get to here. So Jeff asked about like the emails. So a couple of people asked about the content of the emails. Emails are the same, the same tips that we shared on the letters. They are not newsletters. They're not e-newsletters. There is a time and a place for an e-newsletter. That place is dwindling. So the old school way was we're going to send out something every Monday, right? Every Monday of the month or every first Monday of the month, we're going to send it out, whether we have great content or not. Like that's just what we do. Don't do that. Like what we did in the case study with Conde, they're heartfelt emails from him. They're written in his voice. It had his photo in it. We lost that battle. That we wanted to personalize it a little bit with a photo, but it doesn't have a huge banner at the top. It doesn't have the logo everywhere. It's not HTML. It doesn't look like a newsletter. It looks like something that he sat down and wrote, both in tone and in structure. You will see much better. That was 5 muches. Much better response if it's written in a heartfelt way and it's just text versus if it's an e-newsletter, because our human brain is wired. When we open up our email and the first thing we see is a huge banner across the top, it just screams that this is something marketing, right? This isn't from a friend of mine or somebody, a real person. It's from a marketing department, and that's not going to get you what you want.
Right. And that should come from a person's email. So like the reply email should go back to the person that sent it, should have their name across it, things like that.
Yes. If the biggest fear that you have is that donors are going to respond and email you back, congratulations, you work at a wonderful nonprofit. Solve that problem, right? Find somebody, you can get an intern who can help you, respond to emails or whatever it might be. Don't think that, I'm going to be flooded with responses. I got to make sure it comes from do not reply at organization.com. Don't do that. Have it come from a real person. You'll be shocked how well your appeal does.
Perfect. Can you just talk a little bit more about the database systems, and like you talked about grouping people together so you don't miss, donors if a husband and wife gave separately.
Right.
There's just big concern around that.
Right. That's going to open up like a 2-hour webinar discussion here. So there's lots of nonprofit systems. So most of our clients use Blackbaud Razor's Edge. The next most popular one is probably, a combination. There's Donor Perfect. There's Salesforce. If a nonprofit is big enough, they might be using Salesforce, or any of the others, Bloomerang, Neon, Classy, like any of them. They each have their pros and cons, right? The biggest issue we have when we work with clients is not that they have the wrong system. It's that they're putting bad data into the system. They're not following good processes. They don't have a plan for, soft credits and attributing husband and wife gifts to the same entity. So it's really less, when people ask this question, it's rarely about can their software do what they need to do. It's almost always about we need to go in and clean that thing up, and then we need to get better about, our processes going forward. I don't know how much more technical I can get here and keep within time, but if you have specific questions, feel free, email me. Ashley will probably do another webinar at some point with some of the data team where we can talk about this in more detail.
Perfect. Any research on pledge cards as part of a remittance envelope, kind of that all-in-one?
Yeah. Do you ask for a gift when they're, am I reading that the right way? So a pledge card is part of the remittance envelope. So
yeah,
like
the tear off or standalone, I think kind of the all-in-one envelope included piece. Yep.
So a lot of our clients, we work with a lot of large Catholic dioceses, and they'll have direct mail that goes out with a tear off pledge card, and then they'll have church like in pew live cards where the card itself is part of an envelope. That's perfectly fine in that environment. If you're in an event or if you're asking people in person, it's okay to have a bank tail envelope where you can, fill it out and tuck your credit card information in there or your check or whatever and fold it up. That's perfectly fine. Do not though use those in mailings. It looks weird. If you're using one of those self-sealing type things, don't do that in a mailing. Use a pledge card and a number 9 return envelope, and make sure that your letter is always your letter. The other thing we see that underperforms, but people love to do it, is like a kind of a hybrid, like newsletter type thing with a card that's part of it. Like, don't do that. Write a letter. People want a letter. They will read a letter. They don't want to open up an envelope and then get like a glossy newsletter type thing. It's just weird. It's okay to include collateral, but you should always have an anchor letter with it.
Perfect. Great. Can you speak to special appeal letters, like a first-time donor, or first-time plan giving letter, or the specific groups that we were referencing in this different segments of the letter?
Yeah. So first-time donor, it's all about, first I'd go back to what we started with. If they just made their first gift, where your activity should be is in making sure that that first gift was the best gift that they've ever made, right? You should have triggers set up, and this is where we work on fundraising automation. You should have triggers set up so that if somebody made a gift and they weren't in your database before, they're getting a phone call or getting a heartfelt email from you. They're getting that personalized response that says, hey, I think that you just made your first gift. Like, let me introduce myself. My name is Nick. My whole job is to make sure that we use your gift wisely and that you're willing to make more of them if we do a good job. So apart from the appeal itself, make sure that that's a really special moment anytime somebody makes their first gift. There's tons of ways that we can talk about how to do that. Then when it comes to asking, again, when it comes to the direct mail, show them, I know that you made your first gift recently. I asked them if it was a good experience. Tell them, I hope that we did our job and we showed you how you used your gift. And I'm hopeful that you'll make another gift now, and that will work. We get asked a lot about recurring giving. So we've had clients and we've tested out and made a lot of mistakes in this and learned from it. It's really tough to segment out potential recurring donors or sustaining donors, like with a standalone appeal. So if you're an organization,
we may have lost Nick in the process, so we'll see if he comes back. Let's see, we can move on to some of the other questions. So one of them here was a comment to the buck slip comment that I had made. So purpose of a buck slip. So sometimes we'll stick a brochure or something in along with that long heartfelt letter. And but sometimes, those are expensive to do. So if you can't do that in your second and third appeal letters, just doing a pledge card size buck slip with a little information, faces, making it really bright and fun and cheery, and says something a little bit about what your organization's doing. You can use that real estate if you need to do that. We will. And then bilingual organization. So if you have English speaking donors or French speaking donors, really our best advice to that is to have that information in your data. We don't strongly recommend doing English on the front, French on the back, or Spanish on the back. It's not as personal. You're saying we don't know what your preferred language is. So if you are able to capture all of that in the database and then are able to extract that out and send them only the English version or only the French or only the Spanish version, I think that's the best way to go, because then it's really saying to them, we know you, we see you.
It will perform better.
Oh, there, you're back.
I didn't know if it was me or you, so I'm thinking, oh boy, I better just keep going here in case it was me.
Perfect. Sorry. You keep going. You're frozen. You were frozen on my end, so I kept going. And I'm
Ashley, was it one of those where I was frozen? My face was like all weird.
A little bit.
Love it when that happens. Okay. Did we answer the question about Carrie had asked about English and French, like dual language?
I was in the process of going through all of that. And I had just said, it's great if you have that information in your database and you can know if they speak English or French or Spanish, and you can really send them one version or the other versus a front back, just because that's not as personal. And, it's just not saying that you know who they are. So
that gives me great confidence that we answered it exactly the same way, even though I was talking to dead air. Yes. Right. Don't try and be all things to all people. Write it in one language from there.
Yep. I know people want you to finish talking about the recurring giving message that you were saying, because it sounds like you cut out for a lot of them. So if you can keep going in that vein.
It was a really great point I made too, right when I froze up for everybody. So here's the lesson we learned about recurring giving. We had clients, your hospital foundation, you send out 4 different mailings already. Your boss says, hey, we got to get some sustaining givers in here. Do not launch something new to get sustaining givers in the door. Don't say we need a new initiative and a new letter and all this stuff. That will not work. What will work is look at what you're already doing, the letters that you're sending out, and specifically the pledge cards, and adjust those to promote recurring giving, right? When you on your pledge card, make sure that one of the boxes is not just, I want to make a gift, but I either want to make a one-time gift or I want to make a monthly gift. And when they make a monthly gift, invite them to just keep it going, until I say to stop. So recurring giving is much more about the structure of your pledge card and the structure of your donation funnel online. When people go to donate online, again, probably far outside the scope here, we could talk for hours about what that donation page looks like, and I know that we have one on tap. But your online giving experience should prioritize recurring giving, not in a sneaky way, not like with a checkbox that's already checked saying, we're going to fool you into making a recurring gift, but in a way that invites them to make a recurring gift. It highlights that and then gives them the option to instead make a one-time gift if that's what they want to do. So don't launch something new, adjust what you're already doing if you want to focus on recurring giving.
Perfect.
Okay.
Any advice on that outer envelope on what, if it should be have a bunch of design or simple?
Yeah, so I'm fine with the design. I mean, the whole point of the outer envelope is just you need people to open it. That's all there is to it. So experiment, try new things. We do a lot of that. Anything you can do to make it stand out. The number one rule, Ashley, you probably would have said the same thing if I cut out. Stop sending mail in a window envelope like it looks like a bill. If you, and I know that it happens. I know that you've got a controller at your organization who's saying, hey, we have all these envelopes. Why can't we just use the window envelopes? Because you will raise so much less money, it'll be humiliating. Don't do it. Make sure that you're right. It's an envelope with the donor's name. You're personalizing it with a real stamp if you can. Those will always outperform certainly the window envelopes and any just blank, boring envelopes. Okay, maybe we should leave it there. I apologize for cutting out, folks. Thank you all so much. Look in your email from a note from me, and we will get that off to you. If you have specific questions, feel free to email me anytime. I'm always happy to share what we're working on. And if you do, if you're lucky enough to grab one of those 10 demo slots for AskGenius, we'll see you soon. If not, next Friday, we'll do a demo for the general public. Join us there, and I think you'll be impressed. Okay, thank you so much, Ashley. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yep, we'll see you on the next call here. Thanks, everybody.